And we are back to What Did AI Say at VickyL-4AI on YouTube. If you haven't already, like and subscribe to the podcast because I know a lot of y'all are listening to it. And as always, gratitude is the attitude. Before we jump into today's episode, which is episode number 120, and the new question we ask AI, let's do a recap of episode 119. In episode 119, we talked about racism forcing itself into minority spaces and places where it's not welcomed, and the psychology behind it. And I think with that episode number 119, we got a lot of information. In that episode, the names Carl Jung and Bolsen, no, Shahid Bolsen were mentioned. And so I wanted to specifically target those two great minds that I have followed for many years to ask AI exactly how they felt and how they interpreted racism forcing itself into spaces. So that's where we're going with this. That's why I said in episode 119 that it would be a two-parter, because I knew I wanted to delve deeper into the thoughts of those two gentlemen on and their opinions and observations on racism, because I think that that is so interesting because they're coming from such different mental states, whereas Carl Jung is the psychologist, psychiatrist. He died in the early 1960s, born to a pastor. The majority of his family was in the clergy, so it was assumed that he would follow in the footsteps of his father, and he didn't. He discovered psychology and then delved into that, did a lot of his greatest work in an asylum, and just is the reason for why we have a lot of the knowledge that we have today when it comes to introvert, extrovert, just different mindsets and different states of being. So I definitely have followed Carl Jung for a great deal of years. Shahid Bolsen, not as long. I haven't followed him as long, but I do like his thinking. And I think that what these two gentlemen have in common is that they are both critical thinkers and they both use common sense to for a lot of things, which is right. That's my wheelhouse. Common sense and critical thinking is my wheelhouse. I'm all about not being attached so much to an opinion that you have that you can't see the forest for the trees, that you can't logically think about something. And I like how these two gentlemen, so different. I mean, we were talking about Bolson. He, was a man born in, I think it was Colorado. He, you know, converted to Islam and then started the Middle Nation platform and a podcast, and has gone on to, he worked with the homeless and veterans and all of that. He also, was a part of the movement with Martin Luther King Jr. And from there, he spun into his own movement, and his thoughts, his critical thinking, his thoughts about racism are intriguing. And so I wanted to ask AI about these two men specifically so that we could hear the overlap and the differences of how they look at the same thing. I thought that it would be very interesting for my audience. So let's go ahead and jump right into today's episode number 120. And what question did we ask AI? What are Carl Jung and Shahid Bolsen's thoughts on racism and its desire to force itself into minority spaces where it is not wanted or welcomed? Okay, starting with Chatgpt as always, the American AI. Carl Jung and Shahid Bolsen approach racism from very different intellectual and religious traditions, but there are some interesting points of overlap. Neither, however, developed a theory specifically about racism's desire to force itself into minority spaces where it is not wanted. That's just me. That was my question. That phrasing is more metaphorical than either author typically used. Okay. Starting with Carl Jung. Carl Gustav Jung viewed racism primarily as a psychological and cultural phenomenon rather than only a political one. Okay. Several ideas from Jung are relevant. Projection. Jung argued that people often project unwanted parts of themselves, their fears, aggressions, insecurity, or shadow onto others. Racial prejudice can become one form of this projection. Instead of recognizing one's own darker impulses, they are attributed to another ethnic or racial group. That's deep. Ooh, this is going to be good. Okay. And that's good for ChatGPT right out the box. Let's keep going. The shadow. Racism can flourish when individuals or societies fail to confront their collective shadow. Ooh. And what would that collective shadow be with racism? Slavery. The more unconscious the shadow remains, the more likely it is to be expressed as hatred, scapegoating, or dehumanization. It's back to accountability. Regardless of whether you actually committed the crime or not, a chapter has to be closed in order for someone to flourish and grow from it. If you continue refusing to close that chapter, then you are kept enslaved to it. That's deep. That's deep. I believe that to be so very true. Okay, let's repeat that one more time. The shadow. Racism can flourish when individuals or societies fail to confront their collective shadow. The more unconscious the shadow remains, the more likely it is to be expressed as hatred, scapegoating, or dehumanization. Accountability is not always the admittance of wrongdoing. Sometimes you're accounting for an injustice that was done not by you, but just fixing an injustice that was done. Doesn't make you liable. It doesn't make you guilty. It just makes you the one being accountable for it. And I think that this is where racist individuals need to figure this out. Because if you keep scapegoating accountability, if you keep scapegoating what took place because you don't want to feel bad, you don't want to feel guilty, nobody's asking you to. The only thing that's required is accountability. Recognize what has been done, understand and say it was wrong so that we can all move on as a people. Okay. I don't know. I want to say I got off on a tangent, but I don't think so. I think that was just an explanation of that. Okay, let's move on. Mass psychology. Jung warned that crowds and ideological movements can overwhelm individual conscience. In such conditions, racial ideologies can spread rapidly because people identify with a group identity rather than engage in self-examination. Let me read that again. Mass psychology. Jung warned that crowds and ideological movements can overwhelm individual conscience. In such conditions, racial ideologies can spread rapidly because people identify with a group identity rather than engage in self examination. People identify with a group identity rather than engage in self examination. I believe that that is why our system is set up the way it is, with the constant move, 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 hustle, hustle, hustle. All of that, hustle culture, all of that is a conditioning to make us think that if we're not moving, we're not doing anything. And that is so not true. Self examination, self critique is so important and so necessary. And when we don't have the time to do that, we don't become better people. And that is why the system is set up the way it is. Imagine that. Think about that. Think about that. A system set up so that we have no time for self-examination. We have no time for self-critique, for the purpose of us not becoming better people. Until we hit rock bottom. Until we hit rock bottom and we have that experience. But if we had time to self-examine and self-critique, so many people wouldn't have to hit rock bottom. Just think about that. That's diabolical. Okay, let's continue. Regarding the idea of racism, entering spaces where it is unwelcome. Okay, so now they're Chatgpt is going to speak on my metaphor. Jung would probably interpret this psychologically. I agree. Unresolved, unconscious conflicts seek expression. Ooh, that is so true. Unresolved, unconscious conflicts seek expression. Unresolved, unconscious conflicts. As a child, you're taught the Bible. You're taught to hate. You're taught scripture to say love your neighbor. Your parents teach you if your neighbor is black, their skin is different, you need to hate them. Don't murder, don't kill, don't promote hate. You don't care about anybody but you. You can hate people who are different because they're different and they're destroying our world, or they're dumb, or they're not as superior as you are. It's like unresolved, unconscious conflicts seek expression. That's cognitive dissonance breaking a mind. You can't hold both of those as truths. You cannot do it. And that is why racist people have no moral ground. They have no moral ground. They have no backbone to stand up for anything. Because from childhood, they've been taught that two opposing ideas are correct. And that is not reality. Okay, that was deep. Okay, if a community consciously rejects racism but has not addressed underlying fears, resentment, or collective trauma, those unconscious dynamics may reappear indirectly through stereotypes, exclusion, or symbolic conflicts. Okay, if a community consciously rejects racism. Okay, racist communities don't consciously reject racism. Racist communities do not consciously reject racism, so they lost me there. And they don't address underlying fears, resentment, and collective trauma. So that part is good. So those not addressing that, those unconscious dynamics may reappear indirectly through stereotypes, exclusion, or symbolic conflicts. That I agree with. Okay, let's continue. That was kind of interesting. Okay, it's worth noting that Jung himself has been criticized by some scholars for statements about race and culture made during the early 20th century. His writings reflect both enduring psychological insights and ideas that many today consider historically dated or problematic. Okay. Okay, ChatGPT is now moving on to Shahid King Bolsen. Shahid King Bolsen approaches racism primarily from an ethical perspective. Islamic ethical perspective. Themes that frequently appear in his work include racism is a manifestation of jahiliyyah, I don't know if I pronounced that correctly, ignorance or moral corruption, not simply personal dislike. Completely agree with that. Why? Why do I agree with that? Because children are not born racist. They are taught. So it's a moral corruption that they are taught. Okay, modern political and economic systems often exploit racial divisions to weaken solidarity among oppressed populations. Listen to that. Modern political and economic systems often exploit racial divisions to weaken solidarity among oppressed populations. For everybody out there who's feeling as though midterms, if they occur, is going to change something, I don't want to disillusion anyone because voting does matter. I want to bring attention to the fact that voting for racist systems and white supremacy, you can't vote yourself out of that because the system is set up with that in mind, with that as the objective. We can't vote ourselves out of racism. We can't vote ourselves out of white supremacy. Those systems must be destroyed and rebuilt. Must be destroyed, and equal systems with equal systems that give equality. No, better systems that give equality and rights to everyone must be built in their place. Voting is not going to change the racist systems and the white supremacy. It's not going to. So we have to have that in mind because change, we desperately need change. Racism has to be put down for once and for all. And we can't put down racism using racist systems based on white supremacy. Logically, that doesn't compute. It doesn't compute. And we need to be cognizant of that because that's not going to happen. If we want to change the systems have to be torn down and rebuilt better and equal for all. Okay, let's continue. Human worth comes from character and God consciousness rather than ethnicity, echoing Quranic, I don't know if I said that right, principles that people were created into nations and tribes to know one another rather than despise one another. Racism functions as a tool of power that elites may encourage or manipulate for political purposes. We know this to be true. We've already done an episode, way back, I think it's maybe 100 episodes ago, about how the white came about, how white came about, and in the 1600s, and how the elites of that time created light skin privilege or white skin privilege in order to have in order to elevate their guard dogs that beat down the rest of the minorities. So, and why was all of that done? To not have a Bacon's Rebellion 2. Because that the white race was created as a result of Bacon's rebellion. That was when all poor people, white, black, Indian, enslaved, free, got together and rebelled against the elites of that time. And so, what did they say? Well, if we can create division, there'll never be another rebellion against us. So, how do we create division? Let's take the ones who look the most like us and let's give them privilege. Let's make them think they are, they're supreme, they're over all the other minorities, no matter if they have education or not, no matter if they have money or not, no matter if they have a business or not. Just because of their skin color, they are superior than the rest of the other people. And that way we can use them to guard and beat down the other minorities. But keep in mind, they're the most useful of our slaves because they don't realize they're actually slaves. So we, like I said, we discussed that in maybe almost 100 episodes ago. I think it was maybe somewhere in the 50s. 50 episode 55 or something like that. Don't quote me. That would just be a guess. Okay, let's continue. If asked why racism seems to force itself into places where it is unwelcome, Bolsen would likely argue that systems built on domination continually reproduce racial narratives because those narratives serve economic or political interest. Exactly. Just what we just said. If you're in a system that is built on racism and white supremacy, it will continue to reproduce those narratives. That's why you can't defeat racism and white supremacy in a racist and white supremacy system. That's not logical. Okay, from his perspective, racism is sustained not only by individual prejudice, but also by the institutions, the media narratives, and incentives that benefit from division. So that is just a logical conclusion. This is why I love people that critical think and use logic. Okay, the comparisons between Jung and Bolsen. Ooh, this should be good because this is going to show. Okay, good. Okay, so Jung, he focuses on unconscious psychology, spiritual, and... No, I'm sorry. He focuses on unconscious psychology. Jung focuses on unconscious psychology. He says it's the shadow. It's that part of ourselves that we're scared or we don't address. And so that part gains more and more power and starts to come into our conscience. Okay, what does Bolsen say? He focuses on moral, spiritual, and political structures. Jung, racism arises through projection and the shadow. Bolsen, racism arises through ignorance, injustice, and systems of domination. Jung, solution, greater self-awareness and integration of the shadow. Bolsen, solution, spiritual reform, justice, and solidarity based on shared humanity. Okay, I like both of those. And I think that we need the combination of both of those. We need to fix ourselves, and then we need to work on systems and reforming them as well. So they're both great. Okay, on racism forcing itself into spaces. If interpreted metaphorically, both thinkers might agree that racism can persist even where people consciously reject it, but for different reasons. Okay, this I'm not getting because, okay, wait. Okay, I do get it. I'm just remembering something that I learned a while back. Okay, Jung would say unconscious psychological dynamics continue operating until they are acknowledged and integrated. That is it. People who don't think they are something don't think they are something because they've never been put in a situation or uh, having to speak on what they don't think they are. But it's not until our backs are up against the wall or that we are in situations where our true potential and our true nature comes out. So, yes, people can be racist and not know it. That is a fact. Okay, Bolsen would say entrenched social and political incentives continue reproducing racial divisions unless the underlying systems and moral attitudes change. We discussed that, and I agree with that as well. Okay, I guess this is going to be ChatGPT's conclusion. Their explanations differ substantially. One is primarily psychological, the other ethical and socio-political. But both see racism as something deeper than isolated acts of individual hostility. It most definitely is. In both frameworks, eliminating overt racist language alone is insufficient if the underlying psychological or structural conditions remain unchanged. That right there is the mistake we made with the Civil War. We only eliminated overt racist and overt racist language. The racism went underground. We did not change the structures and the psychological conditions. That was a mistake. And it's one that we are paying for because we're revisiting it again. You defeat your enemy, you defeat them to the point that they cannot get up. They cannot go underground. They're completely done. Or else, what do? They rise up and they come back to get you with a vengeance. Okay, that was ChatGPT. Let's move on to Deepseek. And just in case you forgot the question, allow me to repeat it. What are Carl Jung and Shahid Bolsen's thoughts on racism and its desire to force itself into spaces, minority spaces, where it is not wanted or welcomed? While Carl Jung and Shahid King Bolsen approach racism from vastly different frameworks, Jung through analytical psychology and Bolsen through Islamic ethics and anti-colonial critique, both offer profound insights into the psychology of racial intrusion. Here's a synthesis of their perspectives. Carl Jung's psychological lens, the shadow and projection. Racism for Jung stems from the shadow, the unconscious repository of repressed traits, fears, and instincts. When individuals deny their own flaws, guilt, aggression, inferiority, they project these onto marginalized groups. Okay, that is true. My pushback here would be where did the unconscious repository of repressed traits, fears, and instincts originate? That's my pushback. Because again, children are not born racist, they're taught racism. So that would be my pushback for that. Okay, let's continue. Forcing into minority spaces becomes a ritual of externalizing inner chaos. I reject my own darkness by attacking it in you. That is so true. The one thing that I will say that I have observed about racist people is that they have many issues that they have not and will not address. And so, yeah, I can absolutely understand. I reject my own darkness by attacking it in you. Absolutely. Okay, collective unconscious and archetypes. Racist intrusion taps into primordial archetypes of the enemy or the other. By invading spaces, the perpetrator enacts an archaic drama of domination, reinforcing their ego through a false sense of tribal superiority. I agree with that. Jung warned that unexamined collective myths, white supremacy, become pathological forces. Of course. Individuation failure. Those who violently assert racial dominance suffer from stalled individuation, a failure to integrate their fragmented psyche. Instead of confronting their inner conflict, they seek scapegoats. Wow. Let me tell you, Jung on point with this mental. On point. Okay, Shahid King Bolsen's anti-colonial critique. Bolsen, a contemporary Islamic thinker and activist, frames racism as a tool of structural violence. Okay, I agree with that as well. Power as territorial control. Racist intrusion is a deliberate assertion of colonial logic. That the belief that whiteness inherently owns all spaces, invading minority structures, sanctuaries, black churches, indigenous ceremonies, reenacts historical land theft and cultural erasure. And just know that just this week, there have been 3 stories about this specifically. There was a story about a white pastor who was allowed to build a Christian church on native land, and then she begins to preach a sermon condemning indigenous practices and their belief system. Insane. There was another story about a white pastor or whatever he was who just walked into a black church and began preaching that they were all abominations and going to die, and they were a sin against God, and etc., etc. And I don't remember the details of the other one, but just this week, these occurrences have happened. So understand that, because like I said before, there are some people in this world who are irredeemable. And if you do believe in Christianity and you read the Bible, you would know how many times did Jesus destroy the people on the earth? How many stories in different cities or the entire population? And why would he do that? Because there are some people who are irredeemable. And if we can read about that in scripture, why can't we accept that in reality? Everybody can't become better. They just can't. And the quicker we understand and acknowledge that, the better off we'll be. Okay, let's continue. Let me read that last one more time, because I think that was vital. Power as territorial control. Racist intrusion is a deliberate assertion of colonial logic. The belief that whiteness inherently owns all spaces, invading minority sanctuaries, such as black churches, indigenous ceremonies, reenacts historical land theft and cultural erasure. Bolsen argues this mirrors settler colonial tactics, forcing presence where one is unwanted to normalize dominance. That's exactly what it does. I completely agree with that view. Completely. Weaponizing debate. When racists demand entry into marginalized spaces under guise of dialogue, Bolsen identifies this as intellectual imperialism. It centers whiteness, drains emotional labor from victims, and reframes oppression as a difference of opinion. This is why on my podcast, when there are people who do present themselves as racist by how they speak, I don't engage. For what? I care not to waste my energy or my time addressing people who believe in racism, believe in white supremacy, which in and of themselves are both ignorant. And who said this? Ignorant people can be taught, they can be reasoned with, and they are able to learn. But stupidity cannot be taught, it cannot be reasoned with, and it cannot learn. Because stupidity believes it to be correct. Can't tell it anything. And for me, I'm not wasting my time and energy on stupidity. Okay, let's continue. His response: no one owes bigots a platform to dehumanize them. Speak on it. No one owes bigots a platform to dehumanize them. Stop giving it to them. Systemic complicity. Bolsen emphasizes that individual acts of hate are enabled by systems. This is true. Police indifference to racist harassment, media framing aggressors as lone wolves, and laws privileging property over safety all sustain intrusion. He's absolutely right. The systems enable it. The systems enable it. Let's read that again. Systemic complicity. Bolsen emphasizes that individual acts of hate are enabled by systems, racist systems based on white supremacy. Police indifference to racist harassment, media framing aggressors as lone wolves, and laws privileging property over safety all sustain intrusion. Convergence. Why spaces are targeted. Both thinkers reveal that racist intrusion is not ignorance, it's performance. Understand that. It's performance. Performance for who, you may ask? Performance for their peers to be allowed into the club. Okay, let's see what they had to say. Jung, it's a psychic defense against inner fragmentation. Okay, I can see that. Bolsen, it's a political act reinforcing hierarchy. The common thread, violence as identity maintenance. Let's read that again. Both thinkers reveal that racist intrusion is not ignorance, it's performance. Jung, it's a psychic defense against inner fragmentation. It's their way of trying to keep their sanity because they're conflicting. Their mind is broken. And the conflicting ideas, the fragmentation creates them needing to defend themselves. Bolsen, it's a political act reinforcing hierarchy. So very true. The common thread, violence as identity maintenance. This is racism. Violence as identity maintenance. Okay, let's move on to their solutions. Now, this should be good. Jung's path. Individuation. Confront the shadow through introspection. Yeah, but unfortunately, not everybody wants to do that. Not everybody wants to be the best version of themselves. You can't force people to confront their shadow when they don't want to. So that's an issue with that. Bolsen's path. Dismantle systems enabling territorial dominance. Absolutely agree. Dismantle the systems enabling territorial dominance. Okay, Jung's path. Collective healing via acknowledging shared humanity. Exactly. Collective healing via acknowledging shared humanity. Collective healing. Acknowledge shared humanity. Acknowledge slavery. Acknowledge the robbery of the indigenous Americans. Acknowledge what has been done that was bad so that we can collectively heal. Completely agree with that mindset. Bolsen's path, solidarity, protect marginalized spaces as sites of resistance. I agree with that. Okay, Jung's path, art, myth as tools to transcend tribal divisions. Art, myth as tools to transcend tribal division. Myth as tools to transcend tribal divisions. Let's get rid of the art. Myth as tools to transcend tribal divisions. Okay. So, getting everyone to realize the truth so that we can transcend the divisions. But how you do that? People have to want to know the truth. And when they don't, you can't force them. Okay, what is Bolsen's path? Direct action to disrupt power imbalances. Absolutely. When we as a community, when Black people as a community boycott Target, we're disrupting a power. We're disrupting a power. When we choose as a community to boycott the Asian community, we're disrupting a power imbalance. So, yeah, that I agree with that. Disrupt the power imbalance. When we choose to boycott Amazon, we're disrupting a power imbalance. So, both Jung's path and Bolsen's path are good in different ways. Jung's path is if we all become better people, we can do Bolsen's path. But unfortunately, with Jung's path, it's up to individual choice. And there are many individuals who do not choose to become the best versions of themselves. They don't. And that's a reality that we have to face. Some people don't want to be their better selves. They don't want to heal and to learn the things that will change their whole thought on their lives. People don't want to do that. That to uncondition and unbrainwash your mind requires a great deal of strength and a strong mind to even want to begin the effort and to continue to do it when your whole life starts falling apart because you realize that so much of what you were taught and so much of what you believe is a lie. So that's big. Okay, key takeaway. This is Deepseek's summary. Jung exposes the internal sickness driving racist behavior, unintegrated trauma masquerading as hate. Bolsen exposes the external machinery, coloniality's demand for total occupation. Together they show that forcing oneself into unwelcome spaces is the act of a psyche and a system at war with itself. Bam. That is so good. Okay. I think I've said a lot during my going over both Chatgpt and Deepseek's answers to the question. So I'm not going to talk about anymore how this affects our everyday lives. What I am going to do is skip to the positive saying, which is coming from Jung himself. And what did he have to say that I wanted to share with you? We cannot change anything until we accept it. Condemnation does not liberate, it oppresses. We cannot change anything until we accept it. Condemnation does not liberate, it oppresses.